My entitled aunt insisted I pay for her lavish vacation, whining, "You make more than me, so it's only fair." When I said no, she screamed, "You ungrateful brat, I took care of you once." At the next family event, she showed up with bags packed, smirking, "Surprise, we're going." My husband handed her a one-way bus ticket instead. Her face turned red with rage. Let me start by saying I knew my Aunt Cheryl was entitled, but I had no idea just how bad it really was until last year. My husband and I have worked hard for everything we have. Long hours, smart financial choices, sacrifices. We're not billionaires, but we're comfortable. My aunt, on the other hand, has spent most of her life hopping from job to job, complaining about how everyone is out to get her while somehow always having money for expensive handbags and salon visits. She's the kind of person who thinks being related to someone means she should benefit from their success, even when she does absolutely nothing to deserve it. But this time, she really outdid herself. It all started when we had a family gathering at our house in Houston. Cheryl had been acting weirdly sweet all evening, complimenting our home, my cooking, even my husband. She usually spent these get-togethers gossiping or finding something to complain about, so I should have known something was coming. After dinner, she slid up next to me while I was clearing plates, putting on that fake, sugary voice she uses when she wants something. "You know," she said, her tone casual but forced, "it must be so nice, having all this. Being able to travel all the time." I nodded, sensing where this was going. "We've worked really hard," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She sighed dramatically. "I haven't had a vacation in years." I made a sympathetic noise but didn't respond. Then she dropped it, "You should take me on one." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. "Oh, Cheryl," I said, shaking my head. She didn't laugh. "I'm serious," she said, her face set in a way that immediately made me uneasy. "You and Derek make plenty of money. It's only fair that you do something nice for me." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "What? You guys go on trips all the time," she continued, like she was explaining something obvious. "I've never been to Hawaii. Or Europe. We should go together. You can cover it." I almost dropped the plate I was holding. Cheryl, no. That's not happening." Her face twisted like she couldn't believe I'd actually said no to her. "Why not?" "Because we're not responsible for paying for your vacation," I said, keeping my voice even. She scoffed. "Wow, you're so selfish." I didn't even know how to respond to that. Then she crossed her arms and hit me with, "I took care of you once." For context, when I was 10, my parents went out of town for a week and Cheryl watched me. By watched, I mean she fed me frozen pizza, ignored me most of the time, and made me sleep on the couch because her guest room was for adults. That was it. That was her version of taking care of me. I blinked at her. "Cheryl, that was over 20 years ago." And she shot back, "I think it's about time you repaid the favor." I was done. "No, Cheryl." She glared at me, muttered something about how ungrateful I was, and stormed off. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About a month later, we had another family gathering, this time for my dad's birthday. I was in the middle of passing out cake when Cheryl stood up dramatically and clinked her fork against her glass. "I have an announcement," she said, smirking directly at me. I immediately knew it was going to be bad. "I am so excited for my trip," she said, putting a hand on her chest like she was overwhelmed with happiness. It was so generous of my niece to cover everything for me. The room went silent. I froze, my fork hovering midair. Then she turned and gestured toward the corner. 2 large suitcases sat there, neatly packed and ready to go. "I'm all packed," she beamed. "Surprise. We're leaving tonight." For a second, I thought I had blacked out. I glanced at my husband, Derek, who was staring at her like she had grown a second head. Then my mom, who looked horrified. Then back to Cheryl, who was watching me expectantly, as if she thought I'd leap up and thank her for making this so easy for me. "Cheryl," I said slowly, "what are you talking about?" She laughed like I was being silly. "You said you wouldn't pay for my trip, so I figured I'd make it easier for you. I planned everything myself. All you have to do is hand over your credit card." She actually extended her hand like she was expecting me to drop my wallet into it. "Cheryl," I repeated, my voice sharper now, "I never agreed to take you anywhere." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Oh, stop playing around. It's already all set." At this point, you could hear a pin drop in the room. I folded my arms. "I'm not paying for your vacation." The way her face dropped was almost comical. Then it was like a switch flipped. "You selfish little brat," she screeched. Everyone jumped. "I took care of you," she shrieked, her face turning red. "I gave you a roof over your head. You owe me." I was so stunned, I could barely speak. "You're acting crazy," I finally said. She grabbed her suitcases and started dragging them toward the front door like she was just going to force this into reality. I already told my job I'd be gone for 2 weeks, she whined. I already told my friends. They're expecting to see pictures. I can't go back and tell them I'm not going. I was speechless. Then Derek stood up. Without a word, he walked into our office and came back holding an envelope. He handed it to her. What's this? She snapped. A ticket, he said. Her eyes lit up. Oh! Finally. Where am I going? Derek smiled. New Orleans. Her face fell. She ripped open the envelope and pulled out a single, printed ticket. A bus ticket? She shrieked. Yep, Derek said, completely unfazed. One way. The silence was deafening. Then, from the corner of the room, Cheryl's own daughter started laughing. Cheryl turned red. She looked at the bus ticket. Then at us. Then back at the bus ticket. Then she did something none of us expected. Cheryl's face twisted in rage. You, she sputtered, gripping the bus ticket so tightly that the paper crumpled in her fist. You think this is funny? Derek shrugged. You wanted a vacation. That's what we could afford. Her eyes darted between me, Derek, and the bus ticket like she was trying to process what was happening. Then, she did something that made my blood boil. She threw herself onto the couch, crossed her arms, and jutted out her chin like a spoiled child. I'm not leaving until I get what I deserve. I blinked. What? She leaned back, making herself comfortable. I deserve a real vacation. And I'm not going anywhere until you give it to me. She was serious. I stared at her, waiting for her to break character and laugh, to say haha, just kidding, but she just sat there, smug as ever. I looked around the room. Everyone was watching, too stunned to speak. Derek exhaled through his nose. You're not staying here, Cheryl. Oh, I think I am, she said, picking up a decorative pillow and fluffing it. I'll just make myself at home until you come to your senses. I was done. I turned to my mom, who was looking both mortified and exhausted. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady, please take her home. Mom hesitated. Cheryl, no. Cheryl snapped. I'm not going anywhere. I already took time off work. I already packed. I told everyone I was going. You can't do this to me. She turned to my other relatives, like she expected them to back her up. Nobody spoke. Not even her own daughter. Unbelievable, she muttered, shaking her head. You people are unbelievable. Then she stood up, grabbed her suitcase handle, and marched toward the hallway. I felt a rush of relief, thinking maybe, just maybe, she had finally given up and was leaving. I was wrong. Instead of heading to the front door, Cheryl turned and went straight for our guest bedroom. The one I had specifically told her wasn't for her. By the time I realized what she was doing, she was already inside, slamming the door shut behind her. The click of the lock sent my blood pressure through the roof. Derek and I exchanged looks. She did not just lock herself in our guest room, I said slowly. Derek let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, she absolutely did. I marched down the hall and knocked on the door. Cheryl, I said firmly, open the door. No response. I knocked again. Cheryl. Still nothing. Then, her muffled voice, I need some time to cool off. You guys are so selfish. I can't believe my own family would treat me like this. I'll come out when I'm ready. I turned to Derek, barely holding in my frustration. She's acting like this is a hostage situation. Oh, I know. Then, as if this wasn't insane enough, Cheryl shouted from behind the door, and while I'm here, I expect dinner to be ready in an hour. And don't skimp on the seasoning this time. Derek let out a deep sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. I'll call a locksmith. That got Cheryl's attention. You wouldn't dare, she screeched. I crossed my arms. Watch me. You're seriously going to force your own aunt onto the street, she whined. You're not homeless, Cheryl. I snapped. You have a house. You have a car. You chose to come here with packed bags thinking you could manipulate us into paying for your vacation. And now you're throwing a tantrum and squatting in our guest room. No response. I turned to my mom again. Mom, take her home. Please. Mom was wringing her hands. Cheryl, honey, you can't just take over their house like this. Come on, let's go. No. Then, we heard it. The sound of her dragging furniture. Derek's jaw clenched. Oh, hell no. I banged on the door. What are you doing? Making myself comfortable, she shouted. Then came another loud thump, the unmistakable sound of her flipping our guest bed against the wall. I can't deal with this, I muttered. Neither can I, Derek said. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Cheryl called the police. 15 minutes later, I opened the door to 2 Houston police officers standing on my porch. Ma'am, one of them said, glancing down at his notepad, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. I blinked. You, what? The second officer cleared his throat. A woman inside this house claims she's being unlawfully removed from her residence. I almost laughed. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Derek stepped up beside me, arms crossed. She's not a resident. She's my wife's aunt. She showed up here with bags packed, thinking she could force us to take her on vacation, and now she's locked herself in our guest room. The first cop raised an eyebrow. She's squatting. Exactly. The second officer sighed and clicked his pen. All right, let's talk to her. I led them to the guest room door and knocked. Cheryl, the police are here, I called out. Silence. Then, good. Tell them to arrest you. I stared at the officers. See what I'm dealing with? One of them knocked. Ma'am, this is the Houston Police Department. Open the door. More silence. Then, slowly, the lock turned. Cheryl swung the door open and gasped dramatically. Officers, thank God you're here. These people are throwing me out onto the streets. She had actually messed up her hair to make herself look disheveled. One of the officers gave her a long, unimpressed look. Ma'am, you don't live here. She threw her hands up. I do live here. I was invited here, and now they're trying to throw me out. Derek scoffed. Invited? No. You showed up with packed bags and assumed we'd take you on a trip. One of the cops turned to Cheryl. Ma'am, do you have a lease agreement or any paperwork proving residency? Cheryl looked completely caught off guard. Well, no, but then you're trespassing, the cop said flatly. Her face turned red. I could see the moment she realized she had backed herself into a corner. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then, in a last-ditch effort, she gasped dramatically. My health. I'm feeling faint. I think I'm having a heart attack. She clutched her chest and stumbled backward onto the bed. I let out a slow breath. She's not having a heart attack. One of the officers sighed and pulled out his radio. Dispatch, we might need medical assistance, no. No, wait. Cheryl snapped, sitting up. Never mind. I don't need an ambulance. I'm fine. The officers exchanged looks. Then, one of them said, all right, ma'am. Time to go. But Cheryl wasn't done yet. Because right as they were about to escort her out, she grabbed my purse. Cheryl snatched my purse off the kitchen counter and clutched it to her chest like some sort of deranged raccoon hoarding stolen food. I'm taking this as compensation, she screeched. One of the cops immediately stepped forward. Ma'am, put that down. And oh, she shouted. They owe me. I was promised a vacation. And now I'm leaving with something. I was too stunned to speak. Cheryl had always been entitled, always had a way of twisting things to suit her, but this was a whole new level. Derek, however, was done playing around. He took one step toward her and said, in the calmest, deadliest voice I've ever heard, put it down. For a second, Cheryl hesitated. Then, realizing she was cornered, she ran. She bolted toward the front door, still clutching my purse. The problem? Cheryl isn't exactly athletic. She barely made it 3 steps before her foot caught the edge of the rug. There was a split second where time seemed to slow down. Her arms flailed. Her eyes widened. And then, crash. She went down hard. The purse flew from her hands, spilling its contents everywhere. Credit cards, lip balm, keys, scattering across the floor. The room went silent. Everyone just stared. Then, from the back of the room, Cheryl's own daughter burst out laughing. Oh my God, Mom. You look like a cartoon character. Cheryl let out a high-pitched wail of frustration and slammed her hands against the floor. The cop closest to her crouched down. Ma'am, are you hurt? I'm humiliated, she shrieked, face red. That's not a real injury, the cop muttered, rubbing his temples. Meanwhile, Derek calmly picked up my purse, dusted it off, and handed it back to me like nothing had happened. Thanks, I mumbled, still too shocked to process what I had just witnessed. But Cheryl wasn't done. Not even close. Because right when I thought she might finally accept defeat, she rolled onto her back, kicked her feet like a toddler, and started full-on sobbing. I can't believe this, she wailed, pounding the floor. The cops? Not impressed. The one who had been radioing an earlier looked at his partner and muttered, we need to wrap this up. He turned to Cheryl. All right, ma'am. You have 2 choices. Get up and walk out, or we escort you out. Your call. Cheryl gasped, like she was personally offended by the idea that she could be removed from my house. I'm your victim, she shrieked. I was lied to. Abandoned. Betrayed. Derek muttered under his breath, oh my God. Then Cheryl clutched her chest again and moaned, I'm going lightheaded. I need water. No. An ambulance. I think I'm having a stroke. One of the cops sighed and clicked his radio. Dispatch, false alarm. No medical needed. Then, without another word, he and his partner each took an arm, lifted Cheryl off the floor, and started guiding her toward the door. She kicked. She flailed. She threw her head back and howled like a dying animal. But they didn't stop. Nua, she wailed as they dragged her outside. I exhaled, pressing my fingers against my temples. What just happened? I muttered. Derek shook his head. I don't even know anymore. I thought it was over. I thought they were just going to shove her into my mom's car, and that would be the end of it. I should have known better. Just as they reached the porch, Cheryl twisted out of their grip. And then, she ran. Not to my mom's car. Not down the street. Into my garage. My heart stopped. Derek's eyes widened. What the hell? Before I could even process what was happening, we heard the unmistakable sound of a car door opening. Then, vroom. Cheryl had jumped into my car. And turned the engine on. One of the cops swore under his breath. She's really doing this. I ran toward the garage, my heart slamming against my ribs. Cheryl, get out of my car. I'm taking it to my vacation, she shouted through the window. Oh! She wasn't just throwing a tantrum anymore. She was trying to steal my car. I lunged toward the driver's side door and yanked the handle locked. Are you kidding me? I screamed. Derek pulled out his phone. I'm calling the cops again. One of the officers held up a hand. We got this. He stepped up beside the car, knocked on the window, and said, in a tone so dry it could have turned a cactus to dust, Ma'am, if you try to drive away in this vehicle, you will be arrested. Cheryl froze. I could actually see the moment her brain registered what he just said. Her hands clenched around the wheel. She glanced from the cop to the gear shift. Then back to the cop. I held my breath. And then, she screamed, slammed both hands against the wheel, and laid on the horn for a solid 10 seconds. Then she threw open the door and flopped out onto the garage floor. I'm being oppressed, she bellowed. One of the cops muttered, I need a raise. Derek leaned toward me. Your aunt is insane. I didn't disagree. What now? Cheryl was lying on the cold cement, full-on wailing like she had just lost everything. The cops were exchanging looks. Derek was rubbing his temples like this entire ordeal had physically aged him. And me? I just stood there, staring at my aunt, wondering how in the world this woman had thought she could manipulate me into giving her a free vacation, and then, when that failed, decided that stealing my car was somehow a reasonable backup plan. But the night wasn't over. Because as the officers finally managed to haul Cheryl to her feet, a new problem arose. A very big problem. Because Cheryl, in all her flailing and dramatics, had knocked over a shelf in my garage. And guess what had been sitting on that shelf? A gallon of bright red paint, which was now splattered all over her clothes, the garage floor, and her face. She looked down, saw the red dripping down her hands. And then, she let out a shriek so loud I actually flinched. Because Cheryl, being Cheryl, immediately jumped to the most insane conclusion possible. Oh my God, she screamed. They shot me. For a moment, no one moved. Cheryl stood there, covered in red paint, staring at her hands in horror. Then, they shot me, she screamed at the top of her lungs. I nearly dropped to my knees. Are you kidding me? One of the cops sighed. Ma'am, that's paint. No, it's blood. Cheryl wailed, waving her hands dramatically. Oh my God, I'm bleeding out. I'm going to die in this garage. Her own daughter, who had been silent up until now, burst into laughter. Mom, you are so dramatic. It's literally paint. Cheryl ignored her, spinning toward my mother, who had been standing frozen in complete mortification. How can you let them do this to me? Cheryl screeched, stumbling forward like some tragic heroine in a soap opera. I am your sister. Mom finally snapped. No, Cheryl, she barked, stepping forward. You're not the victim here. Cheryl gasped. Mom was shaking, actually shaking with rage. I have watched you pull stunts like this our whole lives, Mom continued, her voice rising. Manipulating, lying, making yourself out to be the poor, mistreated sister when you are the one who causes these problems. Cheryl opened her mouth to argue, but Mom wasn't done. You tried to steal their vacation. Then you tried to steal their car. And now you're throwing the biggest tantrum I've ever seen because you didn't get your way? Mom's voice cracked. Have you lost your mind? Silence. Cheryl's face was bright red, whether from embarrassment or fury, I wasn't sure. Then her eyes darted to the cops. Aren't you going to arrest them? She demanded, pointing at me and Derek. The officer closest to her let out the longest, most exhausted sigh I've ever heard. Ma'am, if you don't leave willingly, you are the one getting arrested for trespassing and attempted vehicle theft. Cheryl's face twisted in rage. This is a setup. Derek muttered, oh my God. At this point, I was ready to let them take her. But before I could say anything, Cheryl's daughter, still laughing, finally spoke up. You know what's funny, Mom? Cheryl whipped around. Her daughter smirked. I saw your emails. The blood drained from Cheryl's face. What? Cheryl whispered. Her daughter crossed her arms. Your emails. The ones you sent to your friends. Bragging about how you were finally scamming your rich niece into a free luxury vacation. I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. Derek straightened beside me. What? Cheryl's daughter grinned. Oh yeah, Mom. I read them all. She pulled out her phone. Want me to read some? Cheryl lunged for the phone. Her daughter dodged easily. Let's see, she said, scrolling. Here's a good one. Finally figured out how to make her pay for my dream vacation. Guilt trip is working like a charm. The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once. Gasps, whispers, my mom covering her mouth in shock. Cheryl's face went pale. That's not real. Her daughter raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? So you didn't send an email saying, if I show up with my bags packed, she won't have the guts to say no in front of everyone. My stomach turned. That was exactly what she had done. She had planned this. She had actually thought she could pressure me in front of the family, and when that didn't work, she doubled down with tantrums, fake illnesses, and even trying to steal from me. And she would have gotten away with it if her own daughter hadn't seen the proof. Cheryl was caught. Completely. And for the first time all night, she had nothing to say. The cops didn't actually arrest Cheryl, though I kind of wish they had. Instead, they made it clear, if she didn't leave immediately, they would press charges. That finally seemed to get through to her. With shaking hands, Cheryl wiped at the red paint on her face and gave me one last, hate-filled glare. You'll regret this, she hissed. Then she turned, grabbed her suitcases, and stormed out. I watched her go, feeling nothing. Not guilt. Not sadness. Just relief. Cheryl tried to play the victim afterward. She called up other relatives, crying about how I had humiliated her and set her up. But the second her own daughter started forwarding the emails, no one was on her side anymore. My mom barely speaks to her. My cousin completely cut her off. And me? I haven't heard from Cheryl in months. And honestly, good. Looking back, I think the craziest part wasn't just Cheryl's entitlement. It was how far she was willing to go, how much she truly believed she was owed something she did nothing to earn. And when reality didn't bend to her will, she imploded. I used to wonder if I was being too harsh. If I should have just ignored her behavior for the sake of keeping the peace. But now, I realize people like Cheryl don't change unless they're forced to face consequences. So if she ever tries to contact me again, she won't get a free vacation. She won't get sympathy. She won't get a single thing from me. Not after this. She's done.